everyone, this is Mindy Eggen for Scrapbook and Cards Today magazine, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to create an alcohol ink background for your cards. This is the card you're going to see in the Fall 2022 edition, and this is the card that I am going to be creating today. I'm going to show you how to work with alcohol inks, the different solutions I use, some do's and don'ts, and also one thing to keep in mind is no two backgrounds will ever look exactly the same. So first, let's take a look at some of the supplies I'm going to be using. Starting with the stamp set from Gina K Designs. This is called a Spring Bouquet. And I'm also going to use a sentiment off of the Mixed Messages set. Those are pre-printed messages. I also have some palm and white cardstock for my card. And then to do the alcohol ink background, you need alcohol ink paper or Yupo paper, which is a synthetic paper, meaning that the alcohol ink will not absorb into that paper. I also have blending solution and then isopropyl alcohol in that little squeeze bottle, and a puffer tool is helpful to help move your inks around. Now, if you're worried about your fingers getting messy, you can wear some gloves, which is what I like to do. And I also have some alcohol inks here from Ranger. I have cranberry, terracotta, patina. I'll be bringing in moss, and then I also have gilded in the alloy. Something else I like to have on hand is the isopropyl alcohol, which is 91% in a squirt bottle or a spray bottle. Never put blending solution in a spray bottle. Only the isopropyl alcohol will work in there. I'm going to be working on a glass surface today, and I'm just taking all of my caps off of my inks so they're ready to go. That alloy, you will need to shake that up. Now I'm going to start working on the backgrounds, and one thing to keep in mind as I go through this is I am an over inker. I add way too much ink than I need to, but it's just I always seem to get the results I like by doing this. You really only need a dot of ink. When working with alcohol inks, the first thing is you want to work in a well-ventilated area. You can do that, or some people prefer to wear masks to protect themselves. I usually have my ceiling fan on and windows open while I'm working. I will typically start by adding some drops of blending solution onto my panel and then adding my drops of ink and moving that around with my puffer tool. Now here you can see right now, this is getting really crazy. There's obviously way too much ink on here, but this is my preferred way of doing it. I'm also bringing in some of that isopropyl alcohol that I have in the squeeze bottle. Now, the difference with the two, they both move your ink, the blending solution and the isopropyl. The main difference I have seen is that the blending solution will move your ink and keep the vibrancy. The isopropyl, I feel, moves the ink a little more, but you don't get as much vibrancy. So right now, this is looking pretty crazy, and this is actually the point I love, is I take that crazy background and I may not even like it, and I completely douse it in isopropyl. So then once I do that and add maybe a couple more drops of ink, I pick it up and I start moving it around. And this is where I fall in love with the backgrounds. I love the movement of the ink. I love the colors mixing and combining. And I also had dropped in some of that alloy gilded, which is kind of the gold flakes. Couple things to keep in mind is the gilded alloy moves a lot better and flakes a lot better when you use it with the blending solution. It doesn't work as well with the isopropyl alcohol. Another suggestion is that have multiple panels, not just two or three, have multiple panels of Yupo paper ready to go because you already have your supplies out. You're in the zone of playing with your inks. Maybe you found something that works and you want to try a few other things out. You can just grab your panels and just keep working and not have to worry about stopping and getting maybe some fingerprints on other projects because you had to stop and cut your paper. So each of these I'm going through, you can see I have paper towel also off on the side. I always have that ready to catch any excess ink. And I'm setting these panels off on the side on a clean paper towel to dry. Now I also have alcohol ink on my work surface here. This is a glass work surface. You can spray that or not spray, but add drops of blending solution or even that alcohol, the isopropyl alcohol, and you can ink smush, meaning take your panel and drag it through that ink that's on your work surface. That way, maybe you don't want to waste your ink. Now, I don't use mine quite as often where I feel like I'm wasting my ink. I'm really just having a lot of fun playing with colors. These particular colors that I chose are fall themed. You can see there's a lot of darkness in here, the reds, but I really love that bright pop of color from the patina. Now, as I'm swirling this around, check out those gold flakes. That is that alloy gilded, and those flaked off because I added blending solution to them. So I set everything off on the side to dry, and now I'm going to work on the rest of my components for the card. There are two images on the spring bouquet stamp set from Gina K Designs. I am using the smaller of the two, and I have that picked up with the door of my Misty, and I prepped my vellum. It's hard to see right now on camera, but I have a piece of vellum in there that I prepped with an anti-static powder tool. And now I'm inking up my image with a white pigment ink. This is my absolute favorite way to do white embossing, is stamping my image in that white pigment ink. So I'm going to apply pressure to the door of the Misty to stamp down my image. And then I'm going to take this over and I'm going to sprinkle over the top of it with white embossing powder. And because I used that white pigment underneath, it's really going to catch it and fill everything in nicely. If you have Versamark or any other embossing ink, definitely use that. This is just my preferred way. I have my heat tool warming up on the side, and once it's nice and hot, I make a quick sweep on the back of my vellum and then bring it to the front and quickly melt my embossing powder. You don't want to sit over one area for too long because vellum is a very delicate surface. Then I'm using the coordinating die. I'm lining that up over my image, holding it down with a low tack tape, and die cutting that out. Now, I also die cut out a sentiment from the mixed messages set, and I just lined up the sentiment strip die from Gina K Designs and die cut that out as well. Now my backgrounds are all dry, so I'm going to bring them in here to show you the different ones that I made. I have 4 of them that I did here. And what I'm going to do is just kind of look them over, set the ones off on the side that really aren't grabbing me right now at the moment. This one I really did like, but it was really red. So I'm going to end up going with the more brown tones because I really wanted to use this palm cardstock, which was in my original card. So the palm cardstock is cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I have a white cardstock here that is cut to 3 3/4 by 5 inches that I'm layering on top of that palm cardstock with a tape runner. And then my alcohol ink background, I trimmed down to 3 1/2 by 4 3/4, also adding that dot runner to it and adding it on top of that white cardstock. So I'll have a nice white border around the edge. For the vellum pieces, now this can always be tricky when it comes to adhering them together because in most cases you're going to see your liquid glue or dot runner behind it. So here I have the embossed image and I flipped it over. So this is the back of that embossed image. And I'm taking some connect glue that I have in this little squeeze bottle and I'm adding this kind of all around the leaves. What I did was I found the thickest points of the embossing powder. I added some liquid glue to the middle of the flowers for sure, and then kind of where the leaves are combined, wherever there's the most embossing powder, as you kind of just watch as I go. And then I'm taking my tweezers and I'm going to line this up over another piece of vellum that I die cut out with that coordinating die. So even though we're not completely going to make that liquid glue disappear, because we're adding it in those thicker areas, it is going to disguise it a little bit, especially by layering up our vellum pieces. And also another thing nice about using liquid glue is that we have little bit of wiggle time. So if I didn't line that up, I can kind of shift that over a little bit and make sure it's all lined up perfectly. Then I'm going to flip it over again and I'm going to add that liquid glue to the back, kind of at the ends of the leaves and some of those connecting points again, and add this to the front of the card. And then I'm going to place some blocks on top, just something nice and heavy to make sure that's secured down really well. It might be hard to see on camera, but in person, I can see my dried liquid glue behind the center of my flower, which is where I planned on putting my sentiment anyway. So you can kind of think ahead on where your sentiment's going to go, and that's going to help disguise some of your liquid glue that's dried behind that. My sentiment, I added foam squares behind that to pop it up for some dimension. And then another great way to hide any of those liquid glue spots is embellishments. These are the clear quartz solid sequins from Gina K Designs, and I am just placing them kind of randomly around the image, but also on top of any spots where I might see a little bit of that dried liquid glue. If you have any twine or ribbon, that would be another great thing that you could add to your card to kind of help disguise that. Now, my extra backgrounds that I had made, I am definitely going to save those either for future cards or by die cutting out of them. I can take any of my die cuts and cut pieces out of those backgrounds and use those in future cards. So that finishes off the card project. So even though this is different than what my original card was, the concepts are all still the same. And I hope these tips have really helped you in getting to know alcohol inks. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.